Well, welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. We're doing a Star Frontiers video here, and this one is kind of a police lineup scenario, hence our setting. I want to interrogate, I want to investigate, and I want to examine each of the aliens in Star Frontiers, specifically because I was going to do a video about this, and I couldn't quite think of a way until, fortunately, my buddy Tom Verow, also known as Jedion, he does a lot of great stuff on YouTube about Star Frontiers. He's got Tabletop Tap Room is his channel. Highly recommend it. Go check him out. I'll put a link below. He posted recently on the Star Frontiers Alive and Well forum on Facebook a very interesting little thing. I've got it here, and I wanted to discuss the special abilities that each of the aliens have. Did any of you use them? Because honestly, I didn't, or not very much, which I thought was weird. And I couldn't quite grasp, how do I exactly bring this up? How do I do a video about none of my players, with very few exceptions, really use the special powers of the alien species very much at all? It barely came up in any of the plot lines that we did. And I'm curious, how about for yourselves? And I couldn't quite grasp a good way to do this until Tom posted a very interesting link, or a discussion. He says on Alive and Well, Star Frontiers Alive and Well, he noticed something. The Hummas receive more special abilities than anyone else in the game. The Osakar have one ability that could be considered a non-ability, putting them on par with humanity, who also get one ability. Do we consider this a problem, or should this be addressed? Or is it just suck it up, buttercup, them the breaks? And he breaks down what each of the aliens do have as a special ability. And it just made me think, you know, barely ever in my campaign did a major plot thing ever get resolved or handled with any of the special abilities that the aliens have. What about for yourselves? So, he breaks it down. For example, Dralicites have lie detection and elasticity, but elasticity could be considered two abilities for the multiple limbs and the ability to squeeze through a space as small as 10 centimeters. That's true. Dralicites, we're going to put them first in the lineup here. Dralicites are a very neat alien. I love the Dralicites, probably my favorite of the bunch. And they do have lie detection, which is a very small percentage, but as the player learns more, gains more experience points, you can actually put points into lie detection and increase it. I barely ever used lie detection ever. I think it came up once, and ironically it was in the Bubba and Balgrub campaign that I've already discussed. I can't remember where they were. I think it was on Turladrom, now that I think about it. Something came up. And it occurred to me Balgrub was going to make the roll, and he succeeded. And it was one of the few times a ruse or a slight bit of fakery was kind of central to the plot. And he just suddenly went, and he was like, hey, wait a minute, you're lying. And it actually had some impact on what was going on in that particular scenario. And I thought, okay, good. So the special ability there, that's a prime example of how special powers of the aliens made a difference. That's cool. Going on, though, it's worth noting, so because humans are the default species in Star Frontiers, we don't really get a special ability. We are writing this as human beings. What are the different things that we go through in the world and the galaxy? So the writers of the creators of Star Frontiers just thought, okay, humans don't have a special ability, just like in Dungeons and Dragons. But what we do get is 10 extra points to assign to our ability scores wherever we want. So it's not necessarily a negative to just roll up a human. And more on that later. But let's move on to the next alien, being the Vrusks. Vrusks get ambidexterity and comprehension. This is all Tom's thing here. But you could assert their 8 legs, conferring the highest speed in the game, is a de facto special ability. Ambidexterity for Vrusks, that was a really cool feature. I don't think it ever came up. I think once in one of my early campaigns, a Vrusk who, I think he had hurt his arm or something, grabbed a pistol off a bad guy, and he just switched it to his other arm, and he continued combat. No negative. And I was like, it's cool, but it barely ever came up. The comprehension ability, practically useless. Honestly, I think, like, at least lie detection, you can nail down, okay, that's useful. That's something that we know from life, you know, lie detector machines, or I think there's spells in D&D for lie detection. You know where you could use a lie detection. Comprehension was this very fuzzy kind of a skill. They do describe it in the book, and because it's kind of useless, TSR did like design, you get like a 15% chance, I believe it is, to make a comprehension roll, whereas like with lie detection for the Dralosites, it's only 5%. Again, you can add more experience points into this, but it's not stellar. The Ysarians, now they get Battle Rage, which allows them to get a combat bonus, and to think, okay, there's something. Yes, the Ysarians are going to work themselves up into a frenzy and scream, and you know, the adrenaline coursing through their veins, and they get a combat bonus. Great. I think I used that twice. I mean, my enemy Ysarians, if the party was on the run from a group of them or what have you, yeah, sure, I would occasionally make that roll. And again, it's a small percentage to begin with, and I think most of my bad guy henchmen didn't put a lot of ability points in these things. So rarely were the enemies using Battle Rage, and I think, again, in the Baba campaign, he had a female Ysarian, Salrama, with him. She would roll it, you know, make a chance every once in a while, but didn't put too much experience points in it, and it barely ever came up. So it's a cool ability, but, and it's sort of, again, like lie detection, at least you can see how it could be used in a campaign scenario or a combat scenario or a game mechanic. Barely ever used. Now, I am going to interject one of my aliens as an example that I created for my campaign. I thought, yeah, they have to have special abilities, just like the Dralosites and the Ysarians and the Vrusks. So, for example, my Pickwicks, the rat-like race, I figured I would give them an ability to use their claws in combat, as melee combat, as an extra bit of damage, like, you know, dagger, like you could increase a little percentage to add more damage that you inflict. And I thought, yeah, that's something, because I thought, well, all of the aliens should have a special ability. So I did that with each of mine, and it was interesting, but again, barely ever came up. Now, Tom goes on to a couple of the other aliens, which again, in my campaign, were slightly different. For example, he talks about the Ifschnitz. In the original Zebulon's Guide to Frontier Space, they have a little hairy man kind of a look to them. I just dismissed that immediately in my campaign because I thought that just looks like humans. I'm not going to have little strange halfling guys running around. No, I want aliens that look alien. So in my campaign, they were a little different, but in my campaign, you barely encountered them. The Ifschnitz, according to the rulebook, and this is what Tom brings up, they did have an extra eyelid, which if a flash bomb went off, they would immediately close. Like in that Star Trek episode where Spock is exposed to bright light, he's got an extra eyelid so he doesn't go blind from it. Similarly, in the Star Frontiers, in the Zebulon's write-up, the Ifschnitz have that extra eyelid, and so therefore they do have blindness resistance and a free skill appraisal, geology, or haggling. And their height means they cannot use rifles, which is a liability, says Tom. That's true. They're little guys, well, so rifles are out. And okay, you can haggle or you can do some gem appraising. How often does that ever come up? These are kind of blasé, lame abilities, not really used. How about in your campaign? Do your Ifschnitz use that very much? The Ossakar. Now, this is where it gets very interesting. The Ossakar are a very weird-looking alien, and I love them. And Tom, I hope you don't mind. I'm actually going to use your image from your post because I kind of need to show what the alien or what the Ossakar are like, and I couldn't find another image of them. So, yes, with a little bit of your approval, I will be using your image here. But he says the Ossakar get a highly developed smell that confers a +10 to tracking, and they get extra languages. So tracking is useful-ish. Extra languages. How many of you actually used languages a lot in your game? I did. I could do a video about that. But is that a real clincher, a deal maker for, oh, I want to be an Osakar so I can speak lots of languages. Tom says, frankly, unless the game master works to use the language thing in his setting, the language ability is a non-ability in my opinion, which is kind of right. On the other hand, they can invoke the walking polyvox, or game master can allow the Osakar character to impersonate other characters with their voice. Yes, the Osakar have abilities to very quickly speak other languages, and that's cool, but again, like Tom says here, is that very critical? Was that central to your campaign? Probably not. Finally, and we won't talk about these Sathar, they were the enemies, they did have a special ability, but I don't want to spoil it. And also, I did already do a video, I barely ever used the Sathar, so we'll just set them to the side. But here's where it gets interesting for me. His last one, the Hummas, or the Humma. I don't know. Is plural of Humma, Humma, or is it Hummas? I think I call them Hummas. Anyway, Tom says, the Humma, on the other hand, get spring charge, poison resistance, and a prehensile tail. The ugly stepchild of Star Frontiers got the most love of the game designers. Yeah, that's very interesting. The Hummas were actually the real winners here in the lottery of all the abilities. So you would think, hey, everybody's going to play a Humma. In my campaign, that wasn't true. And I will just hold off on that for a second. But I wanted to more briefly or more broadly discuss in my campaign, why weren't abilities used very much? And is this the same for you guys? I was going through this before in preparation for this video. Most of my players played humans. I went through the roster of all the different characters. Now, I've talked about Bubba and his campaign where he went to the various planets and his buddy Balgrub, played by my brother. Awesome stuff. And then when Balgrub sadly passed away, my brother rolled up one of those rat-like alien guys in my campaign. So there were aliens represented. But I really thought to myself, when I go through the pantheon of all my main characters and all the things that they did, almost all of them were humans. Is that because my players were like, well, okay, I don't know science fiction, what a science fiction campaign is going to be compared to the D&D thing that I'm used to? Do I want to go radical and be like a Vrusk? Now, I did have a Vrusk player, and he did very, very well. The Equalizer, we talked about that before. But if you're maybe a D&D player who's used to dwarves and halflings and gnomes and things, and you're kind of like, all right, flipping through this booklet, the Alpha Dawn rules, and going, Dralicites look kind of interesting, but like, do I want to get into that? The Yazarian, is that, I mean, at least he's somewhat human looking as far as the body type and stuff. The Vrusk is kind of wacky out there. And then you've got, with Zebulon's got a whole bunch of new aliens. I wonder if a lot of my players got very concerned and like found it very imposing of like, okay, this is intimidating. I don't know that I can handle a really weird alien. I'm going to stick with a human. We get a 10-point bonus on our roll-ups. I'm going to stick with a human. I think that's what happened. And here's a bizarre comparison. The alien abilities that were in Zebulon, or in the various rule books, although they felt like a kind of a sales pitch, hey, why don't you come and you can be a Dralicite and maybe have a lie detection ability, the actual, at least in my campaign, the actual drama and the action adventure and space travel kind of took the center stage, and all of the weird peripheral stuff like the lie detection and the battle rage, it sort of sat on the sideline and didn't really play a very central role. Similarly, have you ever seen the original trailer for Star Trek The Next Generation back in 1986, 87? It's wacky to watch it because the way the producers of the show are selling it, here's Star Trek with a whole new crew, the Klingon Officer Worf, Geordi, a man with unique vision, the Counselor Troy, who is an empath. And you must be thinking, okay, this is like some freak show thing of characters that have got a little bit like the X-Men. It seemed like it was, ironically, with Jean-Luc Picard sitting in the center. Isn't it weird that like Star Trek The Next Generation's trailer sells it as like this collection of characters with superpowers? And then we get into a couple of episodes and it was like, no. It's about the human condition. It's drama. It's who are we? What are we doing in the universe, etc. And I think in my campaign, my players kind of thought the same thing. They're like, no. I don't want to be something weird with some strange ability. I'm just going to play a human. That happened with me. Did that happen with you? I'm curious. However, before I go, I did leave a little asterisk on the Hummas, didn't I? You see, in my campaign, my Hummas were a little different. I handled them in a unique category. I had one person play them ever, and it was a unique experience for him, and it was a very strange part of my entire campaign that nobody really grasped. What is going on with the Hummas? So, my next video, I'm going to go into them in great detail, but as a little teaser, I will just say that my Hummas in my campaign, they were all searching for Duke Leto Atreides. And until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.